Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. Listening to Hidden Brain today, they were talking about achieving hope and where hope comes from. And it was really exciting because hope is a feeling, but it comes from a way of thinking. You have to train yourself to think to get to that state of hope. And was really informative because it made me realize that you kind of have to practice hope. You have to achieve it from a way of thinking. And the way of thinking is, first you need goals, but they need to be achievable goals. They need to be things that, and they need to be concrete goals, not just, I want happiness, or I want to meet someone, or I want to have more money, or it's something that's achievable and concrete. So they can't be too out there, too huge a goal. And it's something that you can do, and it helps if you've been working on things like that. So for me, it would be something like, I want to start posting videos on YouTube and Twitter and so forth, and having that goal. But so hope, you get hope from having the goal and then taking steps towards it. And they don't have to be huge steps, but having that goal and then taking steps towards that goal. If you can see some actual progress, that's where the hope comes from, is knowing that you're actually achieving something and working towards something. And so for survivors, that's so hard because we look at where oftentimes, especially when you're first going through dealing with being a survivor, you look at what you've been through, and it's hard to think that you can have hope because of all the things that have happened to you and all the things you do to cope with it. It doesn't feel like you've achieved much. It feels like all you have is this hopelessness. So to start with, it's helpful to have goals that are achievable and then to make small progress towards those goals. And then as you're making that progress, that's where your hope comes from, is seeing that you are able to achieve things. And I think for survivors, something like, I want to start journaling every day. And then as you journal, maybe I want to start telling my story to people. It's things that seem huge but are achievable. And maybe taking steps towards, I want to tell my story, but first I want to journal and write it down. And then when I feel like I'm clear about what happened to me and what my story is, then I want to be able to tell someone my story and think about who that person is. And then maybe just bring it up in small ways. Tell them, look, I need to talk about something, but I only want to tell you. There's ways of doing it that aren't overwhelming.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you think about hope, it seems to be kind of on that line of joy and happiness, because when we have hope, we feel encouraged. We feel like I can move forward. I can go on. And I think as survivors, it's easy to get stuck in that hopelessness and think, I'm not even going to set a goal because nothing ever works out for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I did have a lot of hopelessness because things just kind of came crashing down at first. And then I got divorced, and then things even got worse. And I was going to therapy and going to group therapy and so forth. But it felt like what was happening was I was looking at all my problems, but I didn't know how to deal with, how to address them. It was just all I was doing was looking at all these things that were wrong with me, that happened to me, and that I had done and the ways I was coping with all of that. And it was just bringing up all this stuff. So I didn't have hope because all I could see was what, the past and how messed up it was. And I didn't see a way forward out of that. So I was just surrounded by hopelessness. And I think that's not uncommon for survivors, especially when they first, for whatever reason, they start to address what happened to them. Often it's because their life is a mess and they have to address it.
And it's easy to get caught up in all the bad things. And we know that when some things go bad, sometimes a lot of things go bad. And so one of the things that I've done to kind of keep hope alive is, like, in my family right now, both my brother and my sister, their families are in crisis. We've had some really big things happen. And it'd be easy to be like, everything's wrong. But I have this gratitude practice. And every day, it started with 3 things I was grateful for every day. And now it's 5. And it's so easy to, when we're in crisis or when we're feeling hopeless, to kind of take some things for granted. When I started working with the homeless ladies, I was like, I have a pillow, I have a bed, I wake up and I can make coffee. And so it's finding that place of gratitude. And when we can get in that place and not be in total lack and crisis, but be like, okay, there are some things that are bad, but here's some things that are good, then that begins to restore hope. And I think for me, sometimes, like, I'll put my hope on something, so like a goal. And then if it doesn't work out, it's easy to go see, rather than, oh, this is just a barrier, let's try a different path. It's like if you're going down a road and there's construction and it puts you on a detour, you don't go, I'm going home. You go, oh, okay, there's a detour. But I think sometimes when we're in that everything's wrong, it's really easy to just keep giving up. And then we don't ever get to that place of feeling hope and going, I like that feeling of hope. I'm going to keep making goals. I'm going to keep.
Yeah, you treat every detour like a dead end and like, oh, it's over. And that was one of the things they talked about, was when you have a goal and it's a reasonable goal, don't just think of one pathway to get there. Think of the different ways you could achieve that goal. And that way, if one way doesn't work, you have other options. And it's also important to just recognize the steps you're taking towards that goal. And even if you don't get to the goal as soon as you want, or as soon as you plan, if you're making steps towards that, that's still progress. That's still something to give you hope about. And if the one path doesn't work, having other pathways is another way of going, well, I could still do this. There's other ways I could try.
And, I think one thing I recognized is, as a coach, I see people that'll say, oh, I want to do this. And they've got it all figured out in their head. And they think there's only one way to get there. They think, for instance, they want to buy a house, and they think the only way to buy a house is have 10% down. They go, okay, I don't have 10% down, can't buy the house. And so we will disqualify ourselves. And so if we can be open, if we can say, this is what I want to do, and then all of our logical brain goes, but you can't, because just to be able to let go of that and in your mind say, I'm going to be open to ways that this can happen, because what we know is not always truth. For instance, I get people that want a podcast and they go, I'm not techie, I don't have a computer. You don't need a computer, you can just do it on a phone. Like, you know what I mean? People think they know how things go, but if there's something you want, try to suspend what you think you know and be curious, because you might find a way that you never thought possible.
Yeah, be open to the possibilities. Be open to the pathways that can achieve your goals, and also be flexible. If they don't work, be flexible to try another way, and give yourself credit for what you've tried to do, and look at what, you can learn from. If they were mistakes or they just weren't achievable, look at what you can learn from that. And it's so important, because having hope is what gives us the drive to keep doing things that are positive in our life, to have basically having meaning in our lives. And without hope, we don't feel like we have meaning in our lives.
And it's really easy to feel like we missed out, like this happened to us and it names our future, but it doesn't, no matter what age. And I have had the privilege of interviewing so many women over 60 who were on one trajectory, their life got interrupted, and they were able to start something totally new and never would have imagined it. And so it is never too late. We didn't miss it. And I always remember hearing, God has a plan for your life. And I would think, well, I didn't get it when I was supposed to, when I was young because of all the craziness. So now it's too late, but it's never too late. God still has a plan for our life. And if we can begin to look at that and believe that that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's so important because I know I felt like I didn't have much chance and I just was trying to survive, basically. And I just wanted to get out of debt and get to a place of survival. After I got divorced and I was on my own and rebuilding from the ruins of what had happened in my life, I felt like I just brought all this stuff down on me. And so the only hope I had was to just get out of the wreckage and maybe survive. But learning that I could achieve things was what gave me hope. And I've talked about that before. And that's why this episode of Hidden Brain really resonated with me. It was when I started achieving things that I didn't think I was actually capable of, or I didn't think I would ever do, but I did. And I did it, it was little steps. It was learning a trade, getting better at it, joining a union, getting good at my work, and then being really good and being a success in my work that gave me hope, that showed that I wasn't just a crash victim, basically. I wasn't incapable of stuff. I never thought I would ever achieve. I never thought I would ever be anything but surviving, just basically getting by.
When did that start to turn around for you? Like, was it little by little, or was there one point where you went, oh my gosh, I never knew?
It was gradual, but as it started happening, it built and it kept building. And I think that's how hope works, is as you start working towards something, every little success that brings you closer builds your hope up. And then you even your goals can grow. My goals weren't very big at first, mainly because I didn't have any hope. And so as I started having success, even just small things that I started becoming good at, my hope got to grow. My goals got to grow because I had more hope. So it was a gradual thing, but it was so important because it's what kept me from feeling like every time I had a setback that I was just going to crash down and be a failure. And it made it so that when I did have failures or setbacks, I didn't feel like it was over.
Mm. Yeah, not the end of the world. And I think as we start to make progress and feel that hope, it gives us courage to, like you said, your goals were small, to make bigger goals, because we begin to believe more and see, oh, this can happen, which builds that hope and also builds the faith, even though we may be trying to do something we never imagined.
Yeah, I mean, I never imagined I'd be doing this. And especially 15, 20 years ago, there's no way I would have imagined this. And yet, having had goals and working towards them and having some success in them gave me the courage. It allowed me to have more goals because it showed that you can work towards things. Even if they're little, they're progress.
Yeah, progress, not perfection.
Yeah. And it also showed that when things didn't work out, I could find other pathways. I could find other ways of achieving those goals. I wasn't limited. And I think that was really important too, was not limiting ourselves to just having one goal and one way of getting there. And that's the only way. And if it doesn't work, then just giving up.
Right. And it starts with an idea or a step. And one of my favorite coaching stories is about this woman who thought she wanted to be an opera singer. And so she went to some classes and she couldn't sing. She didn't have it in her. And fortunately, she had a coach, and the coach said, well, what is it you love about the opera? So she couldn't sing. So instead of throwing it away, she found a coach. The coach said, well, what do you love about opera? You just love the singing. She goes, well, not even that so much. I love the story and the romance and the mystery. And I just love the whole thing. I love to sit and watch. And so she went on and on about how much she loved it. And this is what she said to the coach. But the problem is nobody else gets it around me. So if I go do anything, I have to do it alone. And so they came up with this plan to invite some friends over, listen to the opera on a record. It was that long ago, and talk about it and have kind of a coffee clutch about it. And then all go see it together, because then they would understand it when they went. And she ended up turning that into a big business, doing pre-opera workshops with people to help them learn to love the opera. So she started with this idea. I love the opera. I want to be a singer, but that wasn't really it. But because she was brave enough to be curious and look into it, what she discovered is she wanted other people to love opera. So she created this way to help people get indoctrinated or, experience the opera and then go together and make it this beautiful thing. And I love that story so much because it's so easy to think, well, I'm 60 and I want to be a football player, so throw that away. Well, what do you love about football? There might be something that you never has occurred to you, but you just we're just looking at the bigger picture. And so we dismiss it and we don't give ourselves any credit. And so I love what you're saying, because that's where if we stay curious and we ask the questions, or we get a coach and find out, well, what is it about that I love so much? Like, I spoke with a lady the other day. She wanted to be a radio host. I just want to, and I told her about our station where, you can pay to be a talk show host, have your own show. And she goes, oh, well, I only want to do it a couple times. And I said, well, I don't think they'll pay, I don't think they'll let you just, they want you to have
a show
consistency and a 6-month thing. Well, so I asked her, I go, well, what is it that you love about radio? Well, the thing was, she loves being in the studio and just being around it. So, what if you just go to a radio station and see if you can sit in on someone's talk show? So see, it started out as, oh, I want to do this. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. But the idea was still there. And she just wanted to be around the atmosphere. She used to work in radio as sales and she missed the environment. And, it's being curious about, well, what is it that draws me about that? And finding the place where, you can have those small successes and make it a process and take the steps. But first, I remember when I used to say I wanted to be a DJ, I'd whisper it because I thought people would think I was crazy, And did I just go to school right away? No, I started looking in my day in magazines. I started finding out, what would it take to be a DJ? We start looking into it. And in my day, women only did the news. And I didn't want to do the news. So I thought for a long time, oh, I can't be in radio. And then FM came along and I was like, wait a minute, there's women on the radio. So, it's really easy to think we know. And so to just be curious, even if it seems ridiculous, explore it.
Yeah. And I think that's another really important point is if your goal isn't achievable, like maybe something happens to you or something happens and you can't, but have flexibility, maybe look at why you wanted that in the first place and maybe see what it is that you can still do or you're still able to achieve, that you can be a part of the goal. So maybe having flexibility to, if the goal isn't necessarily achievable, maybe finding out what is achievable and work towards that instead. That would still make you happy, that would still give you hope.
Yeah, it's kind of like that idea of when people are looking for jobs and they'll read the job description and they'll dismiss themselves. And really, the job description is way more than the job really is. So when I went over to Warm and I read the job description, it was a job I was already doing there, but I was doing it from a different place. So I already was doing that job and I read the job description and I said, I can't do that. I dismissed myself. I canceled myself because I looked at something and I measured instead of going, and it took somebody to say to me, Laura, you're already doing it. But they go, you're already doing it. They just raised the bar. So just go, and I did, and I got the job, but it's so easy to just disqualify ourselves. And that's that defeatist, non-hopeful part of us that goes, nothing ever works out, or I'm not going to try, and even sometimes, like when I tried to get back into radio, I got a lot of no's. I didn't, did I get discouraged? Yes. But I didn't let it totally detour me. And when I finally did get back in, I didn't get back in as DJ, which I wanted. I got in as traffic reporter, which I was like, I felt like that wasn't as cool. But what it did for me, because I tried to remain curious and flexible, is it put me on every station in Seattle. So often we start in a direction and it doesn't look like what we want. But if we keep being curious and keep being open, it might open doors we never imagined.
Yeah. And that's where our hope comes from, is just finding out that we are able to do these things. We are able to do, I mean, maybe the goal's way up here. We're starting way down here and we start taking little steps. Maybe we get a little detoured, but we're working towards that. And then we realize that we're able to do things that we didn't know we were capable of. And that gives us the hope that, yes, there is actual way of achieving our goals. We can do this.
Yeah. And the feeling of hope is so awesome when all of a sudden you're doing something and you feel it and you feel hopeful and you're like, I want more of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that ties to gratitude as well. I think a lot of hope comes from having gratitude for what we have accomplished and what we are accomplishing. I think that's a big part of hope, is having gratitude for the path we're on, for the things we are doing. And yes, having a goal is important, but also acknowledging where we are and how we're working towards something.
And that believing that things are possible. And I always say, reduce it to the ridiculous. So say you have this big goal. So like when I first wanted to get in radio, that was a big goal. I had to do something first. For me, I had to go to school. Oh, okay. So there's step one. Now I got to get financing. It's like, reduce it to the ridiculous. What's the next step? And I guarantee as a coach, there will be barriers. And those are not hard no's. Those are just detours, and they give us a lot more experience, a lot more insight, and sometimes they save us from something terrible, getting into something bad, like Garth Brooks' song about thanking God for unanswered prayers. So it's like if we can keep that open mind and keep curious and be grateful. And I'm not saying we won't get discouraged or whatever, because I know I did, but I always picked myself back up and went, okay, this isn't the end, right? It's not a dead end. It's a detour.
Yeah.
The path might be a little different than I expected, but.
Yeah, and be prepared for the unexpected. Allow things to happen that don't happen the way you think they will, but when they do, you can gain from them still. You can still learn from them. You can still find ways of working with them. And that way you still have that hope. But it's so important to have hope in our lives, because without it, we don't feel like we have much meaning. We don't feel like we matter, that there's anything that we're doing that matters.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the book, but I read a book and the guy was talking about the second half of life, and he was talking about mantras, and he goes, I'm not into mantras and affirmations. And he goes, but I found myself always going, oh, that won't work out. And so he said, what I started to say is when I would have a thought, and then I'd start to think, well, that'll never work out. He said, I just would say, everything always works out for me. And then he said, I would look for proof. So whatever was happening, I'd wake up, I'd say several times a day, everything always works out. So if I was going to the store and I found good parking, or if I saw a dime on the sidewalk, or anytime I saw anything, which is gratitude really, then I would say, oh, look, here's evidence that things are working out, because our brain believes what we tell it. And if we're always telling it nothing works out, it thinks that's what we want, and it looks for things to not work out.
Yeah. And, there's always things that happen, but we don't have to treat it like the end, like it means that we'll never achieve anything. And I know for me, it took me a while to get past that feeling. It took me a while of I felt so defeated, and I felt like I was doomed from the beginning. And that lasted for a while. And even when I was first going to therapy and in group, and that was actually, several of the men in my group felt the same way. They just felt defeated. They felt doomed. They didn't feel like things were going to get better. And that's the way I felt for quite a while. But there's always ways of finding a way. And I think that's what I learned, was you can find a way. It's not always easy, but there's always ways of finding a way. And I think it also helped me. Part of what happened when I was in that feeling of defeat is I'd given up and I didn't have any goals. I didn't have hope because I didn't feel like there was anything out there. I didn't think I could get past this place of just defeat. I didn't look towards having even small goals. I'd just given up. And that's why the goals are so important.
Yeah. Well, and it's okay if you are feeling defeated. It's okay to feel that way for a little bit. We just don't want to stay there. And I don't know if I've told you this story, but when I was trying to get back in radio, I had gotten so many no's, and I was up for a pretty big station in Seattle. And I found out I didn't get it, and I was so upset. But that afternoon, I was running Big Brothers Big Sisters, so I had to go over to we had one of those outside buildings, a duplex or whatever that you go. And I called the ladies there because there was a couple of different organizations in that building. And I said, listen, you guys have been so supportive. I didn't get the job, but I don't want to talk about it when I'm there because I'll probably cry. I'm so upset. And I don't want the kids to see me cry. So this would happen. I got my answer, but can we leave it alone? So when I got to the building, I went in and there, it was at a school. So there was that school red paper and sparkles everywhere. And I thought, I've been so caught up in my own wanting to get back in radio that I forgot somebody's birthday. And I was just like, man, I have been so absorbed in my own stuff, And I ran to the back room and I go, oh my gosh, whose birthday is it? What did I miss? And they go, surprise, it's a pity party for you. And you know what? Their belief in me and them loving on me that day, I tried one more time. And that's when I got on at Metro. That's when I got on because I was done. And I had said, I'm done. But that gave me the hope to try one more time.
Yeah.
So
achieving hope, it's the most important thing I learned from this was having goals that are attainable, that are reasonable, but having concrete goals. And I think that's what I was lacking back when I wasn't feeling any hope, and looking at the steps you can take to get towards that and having more than just one pathway, giving yourself options that, there might be different ways of achieving it. And then just taking the steps, the small steps at first and working towards it. And that's what gives you the hope. And hope is possible. Hope is there. But I think what I learned from this is hope is a feeling, but it comes from our way of thinking about ourselves. It's the way we think about ourselves that gives us hope. And that was like a big eye-opening statement to me.
Right. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to have hope. It's like, oh, I want to do this and maybe I can. And then that builds hope and you set the goal. So it's kind of a want and an action.
Yeah.
I love that.
And also the important part is the way we think about ourselves that gives us the hope, the way we think about what we're doing and where we are rather than where we've been and what's happened to us, thinking about that goal.
Yeah. And to keep in mind that we've been programmed. So when we're going for a goal, going for hope, the self-talk is going to be like, oh, you're a failure. Oh, for me, it was idiot because I was called an idiot. And then to be like, oh, that's old programming. I'm going to go there, but I don't have to stay there. I'm not an idiot. I do some really smart things. Like it's just telling the truth. It's, it's not making up stuff like I'm a queen and I rule the universe. It's like, no, I called myself stupid. I called myself a failure, but that is really not the truth. The truth is I have failed at a few things, but it's put me on this other trajectory, right? So when we speak the truth to ourselves, then even though there's part of us that want to go there because we want to live in that I'm a failure, because then we don't have to do anything, but it's really not where we want to live. And it's not where hope lives.
Yeah, and that was the way it was for me. I mean, I felt like I was doomed. I felt like I'd been defeated and I didn't have hope, but just taking those steps towards the goal. And when I started making progress, it gave me more hope. And that is where things changed for me.
Yeah. And it builds and builds. I love that.
Yeah.
So here's the challenge. Take a step.
Yeah.
Make a decision. Put yourself out there and take one step towards something that you know that you want.
Yeah. Give yourself a goal. Think of the pathways towards that and take a step on one of those pathways.
I even say a lot of people go, well, I don't know how. I go, the how shows up. You make a decision, the how will show up. And if you can believe that process will happen, if you can go, I don't know how, but Lori said the how shows up, it will. I promise.
Yeah, it worked for me. That's how I did this podcast. I had no idea what I was doing.
The how shows up.
The how shows up, and look where we are.
Full of hope.
Yeah, hope. It's so important in our lives, and it is achievable.
I love that. Well, this is where we leave you with a challenge. Find something you want so you can start to have hope if you don't already, and when we take some time to pray.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, especially for your hope in us. You never give up on us. You always believe in us. And you are the one that wants us to have hope in our lives, that wants to guide us along the pathways towards the goals that you have given us. You know what you want for us. You know the things that you want us to achieve. And Lord, I just pray that for anyone listening, you would be a part of their hope in their lives, that you would be there and present with them and encourage them in their lives towards attaining those goals that give them meaning. In your name I pray.
And Father, I ask you, if we need a spark, if we're stuck in kind of a hopeless place, maybe a depressed place, maybe we haven't got counseling yet, or maybe we need antidepressants. And if we're feeling stuck, I just ask. You say, if we ask, we will receive. We have not because we ask. I pray that you will give us a spark, an idea, a thought. And maybe there's something we've been pushing down. We know it's something we want, but we just don't even think in any real world it's possible that we'll start to entertain that thought, because you created us all to do something. And maybe we're thinking, oh, somebody else is already doing it, but there's room. Father, there's room for more podcasts. There's room for more books. There's so much room for more dreams. And we know that you've given us such an individual spirit that nobody will do the thing like we would do it. And so I pray for that spark that would bring us to that next step of beginning to be hopeful, and then to beginning to have a dream and beginning to step in that direction. And that leads us to living a life of joy that you want for us and that the Bible says you want for us. So I thank you for that. I pray for that spark in your son's holy name. Amen.
Amen.